Hello! No, unfortunately, ski season hasn't really arrived yet in the lower 48 states, but our first significant snow fell around this time last year, and so I'm very much in the mood to get skiing. In the absence of snow, I'm going to do a retrospective video with some of last season's footage, specifically trying to figure out how my skiing went from this to this. As a disclaimer, let me first say that I'm not telling anyone how they need to be telemark skiing. That's not my place as obviously a non-expert, and it probably isn't anyone's place. If your technique allows you to ski the way that pleases you while staying safe, then isn't that all that matters? Instead, my goal here is to analyze my own skiing because it helps me, and then to publish my analysis because it might help other beginners. I feel like my improvements last year were the result of happy accidents, which are great, but not the best thing to depend on if you want to accelerate your progress. Maybe by sharing my happy accidents, I can save you some time this season. So, here's my first accidental discovery. Spend time getting on your edges on low-angled slopes, even though it may not seem super necessary there. I had always heard, of course, that beginners should start by telemarking in a traverse across a slope, but I could do that all day long from day one, and it didn't seem to benefit me. I didn't see the reason for it, it was too easy, and I soon abandoned this drill. In hindsight, maybe this is obvious, but drills aren't meant for you to be able to do a drill itself, but to isolate part of a more complicated set of skills. Here's how I learned the importance of this drill, although I would add one more element to it. It started out in very beginner fashion. I saw on the internet that inclination was criticized and angulation was praised, so like a simple beginner, I thought I needed to eliminate all inclination. The importance of angulation was then further driven home in January when I skied some, let's call it corn, in the schoolyard. When skiing the soft snow, my lack of angulation worked fine, but whenever I crossed over icy tracks packed down by a truck, my front edges would catch and spin towards a traverse. Crossing over from soft snow to hardpack allowed me to feel side by side the effects of inclination in different snow conditions. The correction I needed to make was obvious enough from what I had seen on the internet. I needed to discipline my upper body to keep my center of mass over my skis, especially laterally, and it helped me that day. But I overgeneralized this principle, and from then on ended up doing this awkward thing where I would angulate the entire time throughout my turns as I shifted the skis from edge to edge, always keeping my upper body leaning to the outside of the turn, from initiation all the way to completion. As it turns out, ultimately that kind of skiing isn't sustainable on steeper slopes because it creates a very slow, shallow, carved turn, guided only by the side cut and maybe the flex of the skis. What I had essentially done by dropping inclination and adopting angulation was trade turning too much for turning too little. And yet, here's how I ended up benefiting from my mistake. You see, when skiing low angle slopes like you typically would or should as a beginner, it can be a bit awkward trying to angulate over your skis. I think this is because your acceleration downhill is so slight that it won't quickly balance you out if you put your center of mass significantly outside of your base of support. Too much angulation and you're just throwing yourself off balance. The result of this is that skiing low angles can make it take a long time to understand the need for or the feel of being on your edges. So even though my skiing at this point wasn't anything to emulate, my serendipitous mistake did allow me to get that elusive feel and stay on the low-angled slopes that I felt comfortable with. The practical application of this is go find yourself a low-angle, firm slope, or else do traverses across a steeper slope like the old videos recommend. But what I would add is to try rolling from edge to edge on your skis while making those lead changes, with the focus of figuring out how your upper body and lower body need to offset each other in order to be balanced on your edges. The goal then isn't just to balance your weight fore-aft between the skis while in the telemark squat, but to also feel how to keep your weight balanced over your skis laterally while getting on those edges, which will be vitally important when you eventually want to link turns downhill. Well, this brings me to my second serendipitous development. Doing skidded hockey stops over and over can help you figure out how to link turns. If one of my main mistakes this winter was angulating or counter-rotating throughout my turn, and thus hardly turning at all, at least there was always the end of the run when I needed to stop one way or another. Enter the hockey stop. I've admired for a while how some folks on YouTube make this final part of a run look elegant and controlled, and I wanted to look cool like them. Early on in the winter, you can see that I tried to do my hockey stops by leading with my upper body and pulling my skis into the traverse. But whether or not I accomplished it, my goal was always to be able to do the stop without using my poles to catch myself. Eventually, this necessitated using angulation and counter-rotation to do the stop. Little by little, I started to feel how I could steer my skis into a skidded traverse while maintaining angulation. This became all the more important one day when I skied so long that my leg muscles were cramping several miles back in the backcountry. To get back down the mountain, the push and pull of doing a pizza or making parallel turns was going to be too much for my muscles. I decided I needed to make safe telemark turns, as that allowed me to slice through the snow. I resorted to doing one hockey stop after another over and over until I got safely back down the slope. The unexpected benefit of this was that those repeated hockey stops allowed me to feel that finicky point between where a turn goes so far that it concludes in a horizontal traverse versus where I have just enough downhill momentum still to link into the next turn. Up until this point, my turns were either no turn at all or a turn that I couldn't arrest in time to salvage into a link to the next turn. The very next time I went out after this particular outing, I was finally able to link turns in Telemark. Moral of this story, go practice your hockey stops. It gives you a safe way to isolate aspects of angulation and steering without becoming a runaway train downhill. And it can help you feel the degrees of difference between a turn that stops and a turn that links. Okay, so here's my third and final accidental lesson from this past season. Making Alpine turns when conditions get tough can help improve your telemark turns. Now, I've skied with enough Alpine skiers who can't telemark to know that only skiing Alpine does not make you also able to ski telemark. At some point, telemark is enough of its own thing that you have to practice it specifically. That said, swallowing my cross-country downhill skier pride and making Alpine turns did translate to better telemark turns. Here's how. As an insecure skier, I generally found security in the connection my skis had to the snow. I wanted to feel those edges biting and know that my skis weren't going to plane out of control. But one day, specifically tax day, April 15th, I decided to be a little more sendy as I made Alpine turns down a steeper slope than I would typically have skied without pauses. In order to succeed at this, I had to be able to bring my skis around more quickly. I did this, as one should do, by maybe for the first time actually unweighting my skis a bit so I could pivot them in as small a vertical distance as possible. This sensation of unweighting to pivot was eye-opening for me. The next time I went and practiced telemark, I was able to use it to help me flatten my skis to momentarily disengage my uphill edges and rotate the skis to the downhill edges while simultaneously steering or smearing the skis into the next turn. The moral of this story, go ahead and make Alpine turns sometimes, but take advantage of the stability of that turn to practice things like unweighting and pivoting. Also, when the going gets tough, this can be a great way to build your confidence on a challenging slope so you can then telemark it with more assertiveness, because ultimately, too much fear can hamstring your ability to ski your best. So there you have it. Embrace drills, take advantage of happy accidents. Happy telemarking.